This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Hello, I'm Phil McKinney, and welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where we are all about helping you go from an idea to launching your innovation. Today we have a special guest. It's a longtime friend, Matt Bross. Matt and I ran into each other, got to know each other in my previous life when I was at HP. And Matt at the time was the Chief Technology Officer for British Telecom. Matt has a long and distinguished career both at British Telecom, where he led the effort on what was called the 21st Century Network. Prior to that, he was the CTO at Williams. He followed his BT experience, taking on the CTO role at Huawei. And then now he's out there helping startup companies, and actually just recently took the CEO role for a new company. So I'm going to let him explain that. So, hey, Matt, thanks for taking the time out on your Sunday to come join us here on the show. I really appreciate that.
Phil, it's great to connect with you, and I appreciate the opportunity. Yes, the new adventure I'm on is a high-tech startup called Compass Networks, Phil, and very much in line with killer innovation. We have invented the first piece of technology where you can land a bundle of fiber directly into a processor. And while at first that may cause people to yawn, the idea of being able to extend Moore's Law, the ability to create what I call virtual silicon and continue the accelerated miniaturization of the computing, communications, and storage technologies is being ushered in with this new genre of technology called IC Photonics from Compass Networks. Now, with that said, Phil, it's been exciting 18 months, and I'm really pleased to be on the show with you today.
Yeah, well, this is interesting because last year at Consumer Electronics Show, I was sitting down having lunch with some people, and I got surprised by getting attacked from behind, and it ended up being you, Matt. And what gets me excited about innovation is when you see someone so excited and so passionate, and you pulled up the chair and you pulled out some early work that Compass was working on, showing some of the photonics work. And you and I both have a very deep, long background on networking technology. So I got pretty excited. I've been following what you've been doing, and now you've stepped into the CEO role there. But this is just, when I look across your career, though, this is just one step in kind of a long history of you driving a variety of different approaches to innovation. And I know you're out there talking about this concept of what you call innovation at the speed of life. So give us a background. What's your thinking behind this term that you're using and kind of this mantra that you're out pushing, which is, again, this innovation at the speed of life? What is that?
Sure. Phil, if you just take a quick look at what is going on a planetary basis, we are deluged with technology, services, solutions, and most of it is clutter. But when you get to what matters, it is those innovations that enhance the quality of life or the success of businesses that we come in contact with. And hence, I think when I look at innovation and any innovation agenda, its principal goal needs to be focused at enhancing the quality of life or the success of businesses that we come in contact with. Therefore, the idea, the concept of driving innovation at the speed of life, not at the speed of technology, but meeting people in their personal lives and their professional lives with innovation that enhances the quality of their life. That's the central cornerstone of driving innovation at the speed of life.
And there's also, it's one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately. I've been trying to, develop at least some kind of a framework. When you think about this whole concept of innovation at the speed of life, the fact is that the consumer expectation of the role of innovation is also accelerating. It's no longer about you developing something that's going to impact people's lives. There's almost this pull effect where people are expecting the innovation to be there to solve the big problems that we're facing. Do you agree with that? Are you sensing that also?
Phil, for sure. The whether you are in an emerging technology company or in a large multinational trying to drive innovation, the nature of innovating today has fundamentally changed. And what I like to say is that we have to innovate the way we innovate. We actually have to go at the core of innovation. If you look at innovation in the recent past, everything would happen within the boundaries of the payroll of the organization within which you worked. But today, the innovation will necessarily require you to unleash innovation beyond the boundaries of the payroll of your organization. And that means that you have to be collaborative. You have to be you have to look across multiple disciplines. And so I think when you referenced the big infrastructures that we've built, 21st Century Network at British Telecom or the large deliveries of infrastructure from HP, one of the big differences today is that infrastructure cannot move at the same time cycles as customer expectations. And so what can is software. We have to really move away from infrastructure-based innovation to innovations that happen at the speed of life. And that means they are going to be driven increasingly from the use of software-defined networks and network feature virtualization and innovations that take place in software cycle times so that we can actually drive things that enhance the quality of people's lives. The notion of big monolithic infrastructures is actually somewhat broken one.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. And I think, you and I have had this conversation on and off over the years, right, of trying to be the innovation catalyst inside of large organizations. And I love a term that you've coined, which is this whole concept of what we call the innovation straitjacket, right? So you're going to be the innovation change agent inside the large organizations. And as soon as you said innovation straitjacket, I got the mental model. I looked back on my own career, and I'm like, wow, that nails it. Talk a little bit about that whole concept of, or at least share with the listeners a little bit of your perspective. They've heard me pontificate on this across multiple shows, but I'm sure they want to hear at least your perspective of trying to be the innovator inside large organizations.
Well, Phil, clearly when you work inside of a large organization, you've got these multiple stakeholders that you're trying to get to align and to enable you to deliver the innovation. And when you start this new role and you're part of this new innovation group, what you don't realize is there's a secret room that they wheel you off to, and there's padded walls, and they slide you into a straitjacket, and they say, now, deliver us a consistent drumbeat of innovation, and let's make sure that the margin contribution out of this is fantastic. And, oh, by the way, you need to make sure that the scale of your innovation out of the chute moves the needle for the company. Hence, innovation from a straitjacket. The idea is that most people driving innovation within large organizations believe the constraints wrapped around them that they're strapped into are the principal barriers to driving the very innovation that the company and the leadership seek. So I think, the approach that we've developed over the years, and I look at is what I call the innovation continuum. You have to really look at innovating the way you innovate within a company. If you invent the most brilliant thing in the world, but you implement it poorly, you wreck the value of what you invented. If you implement it pristinely, but you operate it poorly, you wreck the value. If you productize it in an ill-conceived way, then you wreck the value of the thing that you invented, implemented, and operated. So the idea, Phil, is that to drive long-term and sustainable differentiable shareholder value in organizations and to be that person, that group, and drive that culture, you have to actually look at innovating within each one of the areas within which your business operates. You have to innovate in the invention part of the business, in the implementation, in the operation, in the productization, and the go-to-market, and even the financial model. When you innovate within each one of those areas and throughout them, you have the ability to now start creating a culture of innovation. You have the ability to drive long-term and sustainable differentiable shareholder value, which begets the investment in innovation that you will seek. So you have this kind of virtuous cycle. Then the challenge, Phil, is having the perseverance.
Hey, Matt, we're going to have to take a break here real quick. We're going to jump off. We got to pay some bills here with some of the sponsors. So stay right there. We'll be right back with Matt Bross. And I'm Phil McKinney. This is Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio. This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
I'm Phil McKinney, and welcome back to Killer Innovations. If you're just joining us, our guest today is Matt Bross. Matt and I have been friends for many, many years. Matt is the former CTO at Williams Communications, which is now known as Level 3. CTO at British Telecom. He went on to become the CTO at Huawei, the Chinese equipment manufacturer. And most recently, he took on the chairman and CEO role at Compass Networks. And Matt, let's pick up where we left off. But before we do that, first of all have to apologize. Radio can be somewhat of a little bit of a struggle, given that we have those hard breaks for the commercial breaks. You were talking about the innovation continuum, and I think this is just such an important concept. I want to pick up where we left off, or actually feel free to rewind and let's go through that whole concept of what you refer to as that innovation continuum.
Well, Phil, thanks. We started the discussion with the notion of innovation from a straitjacket, and often what people find themselves is wrapped up in the bureaucracy of their large organization trying to manage multiple stakeholders. And what I've found is that there are two elements that can help pierce that bureaucracy. One is what I call the innovation continuum, and the innovation continuum is simply a model that, when implemented, you can enable your organization to drive that long-term, sustainable, differentiable shareholder value that they seek. And the concept of the innovation continuum says that you, as the innovator, have to really innovate the way you have done innovation. You've got to look at the areas that your business operates and innovate within each one of them. As I was saying, that oftentimes people think when they come out with a new product that product itself is the innovation. But in fact, if a company is coming out with a new product contemporaneously and they're driving new implementations of it more quickly, they're operating it better, they're getting it to market in more creative and effective ways. These innovations in the implementation, operation, and go-to-market can wrap around that central product and actually cause you to be much more competitive. This is where you create standout innovation within large organizations, is knowing that you need to innovate within and throughout that continuum within you, the one that you work in. Now, the second concept, Phil, is around an innovation dividend. How do you measure? How do you quantify? This can be so difficult to get at. What is the quantifiable benefit of the innovation that you're driving from your organization or from your team? And so, I'd like to give a couple of minutes on that innovation dividend piece as a way to measure and quantify so that you can actually take back into your organization the investment that is required to sustain the innovation. These two things work in a virtuous cycle such that you can unwrap that straitjacket and actually get fully animated and start building that culture of innovation so many people desire in their organization.
Yeah, and I think the whole issue of the innovation dividend is critical, particularly in large organizations, right? I could probably write a whole book on how to try to convince senior executives, particularly the CFO, on the value return from the innovation investment. And a lot of people out there believe that there's no way to measure it. It's kind of this black art, I'd yell BS on that. You've got to find a way to measure it. So why don't you go ahead and share your thoughts on the innovation dividend and what you found on your side, and then I can also contrast it with my own experience.
Well, Phil, what I found is that if you are working in the innovation organization, you are rarely accountable for the actual implementation and operation of it. So what you have to do is build alliances with those organizations. And the innovation dividend, I'll just give you an example at British Telecom. What we did was we created a set of innovation calendar of possibilities. And this was done by the internal team. The next, we had our innovation calendar of demand. And when something went on the calendar of demand, there was a business owner that was sponsoring a kind of a 10-page innovation document around what could we do together. Then the third stage was to take that to a rapid prototype using agile development, whereby you had a business owner that was on the journey with you, but now they wanted to really see what was the impact of the existing system estate. How would we get it into the channel? How would it actually piggyback on the existing portfolio? Well, here I'm going to draw a bright line. What we did, and quite successfully I'll say, is that we created this concept of measuring the 3-year forward-looking impact as signed off by that business unit. When that business unit or when that business owner said, I want to take this into development, into the market, you then had internally came up with this innovation potential vision statement. You did your 10-pager that actually captured the investment from the line of business, and then ultimately you got a business sponsor that took this into the development cycle, the delivery cycle, the channel in your organization. And so what we were able to do is introduce this structure called the innovation dividend, and it was the 3-year forward-looking impact as signed off by your business unit partner that said, we think this is going to be the impact to the business by this innovation. And what happened when you started to actually accumulate those together, you could quantify and measure the impact on the P&L, on the line of business that you were working with as a result of the innovation agenda that you were driving within your organization. And so this is the innovation continuum is balanced out by being able to measure the impact of that innovation. And when you put these two together, I think you position your company to drive long-term, sustainable, differentiable shareholder value, and as we started the discussion out, really driving innovation at the speed of life, not at the speed of technology.
That's a great point. When we come back, we're going to take another quick commercial break here. When we come back, what I'd like to talk about, you have a unique position, the fact that you've worked as a CTO role with a number of large organizations, Williams in the U.S., British Telecom in the U.K., and Huawei in China. And there's been this contrast or discussion about what does innovation look like in different parts of the world. So when we come back, I'd like for you to think about answering that question: is how do you contrast innovation between the different companies in different regions of the world that you've involved in? So we're going to be right back. Matt's going to join us for the third segment. To help you go from idea to innovation, we're giving away our 2-hour audio course titled Creating Killer Innovations. Text the word innovate to 33444 or download at killerinnovations.com/innovate. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Need to pay a few bills here with our sponsors, so stay tuned. I'm Phil McKinney. This is Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovators Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We're going to pick up where we left off at the last segment. So, Matt, the question I left you with was, how would you contrast innovation between the U.S., the UK, and China, given that you've been an executive in leading companies in each of those countries? Is it the same? Is it radically different? What's your perspective?
So, Phil, in some ways it's the same. I'll start with the differences. If you look at today, innovation in China, China is awash with capital looking for places to go. And in China, the principal interest in innovations seeking that capital really need to exploit the Chinese market first. And so in China, the access to capital is very high. The interest is to drive innovations in the local market there and then bring them outside of China. If I flip over to the U.S., while access to capital is very high in the U.S., the principal difference is for good ideas, but the principal difference is U.S. looks often to how do you exploit that investment on a global basis. How are you going to access the global markets with it? And it starts generally with a more global view than with a U.S.-centric view. And then if I take the U.K., I find the access to capital in the UK is much more constrained, and the ability to drive innovations, while many brilliant things have come out of the UK. We had over 14,000 patents at BT, some of the very original source patents on miniaturization of components for mobile devices, and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that the access to capital for UK innovations is more constrained than it is in China, and in the U.S. That's just kind of one cut through it, Phil. But if you look at it from the people that innovate, I find them very similar across the planet. You have people who really exhibit a passion for what they're doing, a persistence that is uncanny. They get behind an idea and they drive it, and they take personal accountability, personal commitment to it. And so I find that those attributes of entrepreneurs thinking about, taking an idea that they have and making it big to be, one common across the people that I've worked with in China, in the U.S., and the UK, where they're intensely persistent. They're very persuasive, and they are personally committed to what they're doing. These kind of three core attributes you find common across innovation, whether it's in China, the UK, or the U.S.
Well, what about the issues around the challenges of the senior leadership team? Do the senior executives think differently? Because you were basically back to your concept of innovation straitjacket. Was the straitjacket a different color depending on the country, depending on who you were reporting to? Did the senior executives?
I think that if I took a cut through it, Phil, by talking about trust models, in the U.S., for example, if you are placed into a role to drive innovation, the trust model that you're going to do that is from whatever the sphere of influence, whatever the budget and the control, you're going to be driving that. And I think the strings on the straitjacket are slightly less tightly pulled. If you go to China, what you see is a trust model whereby you have a role to drive innovation, but until you do step one first, or step two, or step three, it increases. Kind of just imagine a set of concentric circles that you step out from the middle. So when you talk about it from a senior executive perspective, yes, in the U.S. and to a large part the U.K., when you take that role, you are expected to operate across that role and are in a trust circle that starts at the outer concentric circle, and if you don't deliver, gets smaller. In China, one of the models, it's really inverse in that you have a role and you need to deliver on the first step, maybe the smallest step, and then it's increased out to where you can have massive influence on innovation within your organization. But it usually starts, and it's almost inverse in my experience about how those two models work around trust. And that translates into what is the color of the straitjacket that you're in.
Right. Interesting. A lot of the listeners of the show are entrepreneurs. These are, they may be working for a larger organization, but they're noodling this idea, and they want to think about, do they take that idea and do they make the big leap to translating this idea, rattling around their head, possibly leaving the company, going out and raising money? You've been on both sides of it. You've done it inside the corporation. You've done the startup thing. You've advised startups. What would be two pieces of advice that you would give to an entrepreneur who's thinking about taking an idea that they have and making that big leap to turn it into something real? What would be the two pieces of advice you would give to that entrepreneur?
Well, I would tell them a good read. I would tell them to take a look at Bill Bryson's book, A Short History of Nearly Everything, and as he references the 5 stages of innovation, it's actually an expansion of Alexander von Humboldt's 3 stages of scientific discovery. But Phil, in there is a set of nuggets of wisdom that whether you're in a large organization and you're about to launch something, or you're going to step out, put up your own shingle and do it, those 5 stages that Bill Bryson points out are, the first stage is that people will deny that the innovation that you see is required. The second stage is that if it by some chance is required, people will deny that the innovation will be effective. The third stage, which I find these to be just profoundly correct, is that even if it's required and effective, people will deny that your innovation is really that important. Should it be required, effective, and important, people will ultimately deny that the innovation will justify the effort required to adopt it. These 4 stages, every innovator within an organization or putting up their own shingle are going to be faced. Then the 5th stage. This is when people accept and adopt the innovation, enjoy its benefits, and attribute it to people other than the innovator. And so painfully so, they deny the existence of stages 1 through 4. So knowing what you're getting into, that you, as I said earlier, and I probably would answer the second half of this, Phil, by being you have to be personally committed, whether it's inside or outside with your own shingle. You have to be very persuasive about it, and you've got to, above all, be persistent, because the most significant innovations don't happen overnight. If you understand anything about them, they're generally conceived and driven and nurtured and worked hard on for a long period of time before you see the fruits of that effort. So those would be my
I agree.
Be well read and be persistent, be persuasive, and be personally committed to it.
Perfect. Those are great examples. So, Matt, if people want to follow you and what you're up to, what's the best way they can find you?
Well, Phil, do a lot of speaking engagements around. I would encourage people. I'm involved with the East-West Institute, which is a global think tank working on matters of cybersecurity, bringing together the cyber powers around the planet to really start to put in place a taxonomy whereby we can collaborate more meaningful in cyber engagements between nation states and with NGOs and corporations around the world. So you can find me at East West Institute speaking engagements specifically on cyber activities, and I am matt.bross10 at gmail.com. Welcome any follow-up on the call. And Phil, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to reconnect and talk a little innovation with you today.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Stay right there. Be right back. We've got a killer question in the last segment of the show. You don't want to go anywhere. I'm Phil McKinney, and you're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
The opinions you hear on BizTalk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, BizTalk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on BizTalk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about BizTalk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com.